rifle presented to the public was a Mauser 30-06, found abandoned with one spent casing in its chamber and 3 live rounds still in the magazine. Authorities framed it as the murder weapon, but the bullet taken from Charlie Kirk's body has never been confirmed to match this rifle. And that is the problem. Ballistics is simple. A bullet carries the unique markings of the barrel that fired it. If the bullet and the rifle do not align, then the weapon shown is not the weapon used. Without that connection, the rifle is not proof. It is a display, and the truth remains unsettled.
The doctor who tried to save Charlie Kirk gave the public the first piece of truth. There was a bullet. But what should have been the beginning of clarity has instead become the heart of confusion. Because the bullet he described doesn't neatly line up with the rifle investigators later paraded as the murder weapon. And if the very first fact in this case doesn't add up, then what else has been hidden? What else has been buried in silence? It's not just about the man who pulled the trigger. It's about every institution that chose not to demand the most basic answer. Does the bullet even match the gun? And until that question is faced, justice isn't just delayed, it's denied. What do you think? Is the case moving forward carefully, or is progress being slowed by procedural delays? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and where are you watching from? To stay updated on every development, subscribe now and turn on notifications, so you stay informed as new updates become available. This is Detective Max, and together we will stay on top of the facts. The first truth we were ever given in this case didn't come from investigators or officials standing behind microphones. It came from a doctor who stood over Charlie Kirk and confirmed what could not be denied. A bullet had torn through his body. That was the fact. That was the anchor. That was where justice should have begun. But then came the rifle. A Mauser 30-06, displayed to the public like a trophy, announced as the murder weapon before the most basic question was ever answered. Did the bullet fit the gun? Because if the bullet doesn't match the rifle, then what else doesn't match the story we've been told? This isn't just about evidence. It's about silence. Silence from those who should have given us clarity. Silence that leaves us with suspicion instead of certainty. And every time we accept that silence, every time we look away, we allow another truth to be buried along with him. So ask yourself, if the bullet was real and the rifle was real, why has no one dared to prove they belong to each other? The bullet was there, that much was certain. The doctor who stood over Charlie Kirk's body confirmed it. A single statement that should have brought clarity. A simple fact that should have tied every piece of this investigation together. But it didn't, because almost immediately, the cracks began to show. The bullet that was described, the wound it left, the trajectory it suggested, does not neatly line up with the rifle investigators later displayed as the so-called murder weapon. The pieces were presented as if they fit. But when you look closer, the connection fades into silence. And that silence should trouble us all. If the first truth came from a doctor, from the very moment life slipped away, why did investigators never connect the second truth? Why was the weapon paraded in front of cameras without the most basic confirmation that the bullet in the body came from that gun? The public was owed that bridge. We were owed that certainty. Instead, what we received was a staged image of closure, and the sound of doors shutting behind us. And in that silence, we are left to ask, was this justice, or was this control? Not long after, the focus shifted away from the doctor's words, and toward a different image, a rifle. Authorities announced the discovery of a Mauser 30-06 bolt-action rifle, abandoned in a wooded area near Utah Valley University. It was presented not as a question, but as an answer. As if the mystery had been solved the moment the weapon was lifted into the light. Inside the chamber was a single spent casing. In the magazine, 3 live rounds still waiting to be fired. Scattered nearby, bullet casings engraved with chilling phrases, taunts that told the world this act had been calculated, almost theatrical. To the public, these details painted a picture of certainty. They told us this was the weapon, this was the killer's tool, this was the end of the search. But was it? Because for all the spectacle, one truth was left hanging. A rifle without a confirmed matching bullet isn't proof, it's a narrative. It's the suggestion of justice without the evidence that binds it together. We weren't shown ballistics. We weren't shown a test that linked the grooves of that barrel to the bullet the doctor described. We were only shown an image meant to satisfy, to silence, to close the chapter before the questions could grow louder. We were shown an image of closure, not proof of justice. Ballistics is not complicated science. Every firearm leaves behind a fingerprint. Rifling grooves carved into the barrel, unique striations etched into the surface of a bullet as it exits. When investigators recover a projectile, they don't have to guess which gun fired it. They test. They compare. And when the marks align, the evidence speaks with absolute certainty. So why has that certainty never been given to us? Why has the simple, undeniable test, bullet to barrel, wound to weapon, never been spoken aloud? This is not an advanced mystery. It is the very foundation of forensic work. And yet, in this case, all we have is silence. Silence where there should have been clarity. Silence where there should have been proof. Which forces us to ask, was this test never performed, or was the result too inconvenient to reveal? Was it never done, or is it being buried? Because when institutions choose silence over transparency, it is not just a mistake, it is a failure. A failure that robs the public of truth. A failure that turns evidence into theater. And in that failure, justice does not live. It withers. The public was never short of announcements. Press conferences, headlines, official statements, all of them celebrating the recovery of the rifle. Photographs circulated of agents carrying it through the trees, of officials nodding gravely, of reporters repeating the phrase, "The murder weapon has been found." But notice what we were not told. Notice the silence around the one fact that should have mattered most, the bullet. If the evidence truly connected, if the test had been run and the marks had aligned, wouldn't they have shouted it from the rooftops? Wouldn't that have been the headline, the reassurance, the proof? Instead, we were bombarded with theater. A narrative carefully managed, a weapon displayed as if its mere presence could erase the questions that followed. But institutions rarely reveal truths in their raw form. More often, they shape them, polish them, and deliver only what maintains control. And every time we accept that silence, every time we nod along to the story we are fed, we allow another truth to die with him. The bullet that should have spoken has been reduced to a whisper. And in that whisper, the public was left in the dark. A bullet is not just a piece of metal. It is the bridge between a life lost and accountability found. In this case, it is the only physical link that can tie Charlie Kirk's death to the weapon authorities claim was used. Without that confirmation, everything else is assumption. Everything else is narrative. And yet, here we are. A doctor confirms the bullet. A rifle is displayed, but the connection between them is never made public. That absence doesn't just weaken the case. It calls the entire story into question. Because if the bullet doesn't match, what else unravels? Was there another weapon? Was evidence mishandled? Or worse, was this case decided before the testing was even finished? Every answer withheld chips away at trust. Every detail left unconfirmed deepens the uncertainty, and uncertainty is not justice. Uncertainty is a void where truth should live, where accountability should stand, and where the public should be able to see, without question, how and why a life was taken. Until that void is filled with proof, we are left only with silence. And silence in a case like this speaks volumes. Responsibility in a case like this does not fall on a single pair of hands. It stretches across layers. Investigators tasked with gathering evidence, forensic teams entrusted with testing, and officials charged with presenting the truth to the public. Each step matters. Each role carries weight. And yet, when the simplest test is left undone, or left unspoken, responsibility shifts from one shooter to an entire system. History has shown us what happens when institutions neglect the most basic truths. Forensic failures have unraveled cases, overturned convictions, and exposed entire networks of negligence. Each time, trust is shattered, not because of what was found, but because of what was hidden. And now with Charlie Kirk's case, we are watching that same shadow fall again. Because this isn't just about a bullet, it's about every official who chose comfort over clarity. Every leader who believed silence was safer than transparency. every decision that replaced proof with performance. And when comfort is chosen over clarity, justice is no longer justice. It is theater. A performance staged for cameras, while the truth lies buried in the dark. That is not a failure of one man. That is a failure of a system. From the very beginning, one man gave the public what little clarity we have. The doctor standing in that room, seeing what no investigator, no reporter, no official could deny, told us plainly there was a bullet. It was not speculation. It was not a theory. It was truth spoken in the rawest moment of tragedy. And yet, what followed was silence. Institutions buried that truth under doubt. They paraded a rifle, recited rehearsed lines, and spoke as though evidence had already spoken for itself. But it hadn't. Because the doctor gave the public a truth. Institutions buried it under doubt. Why does a doctor speak louder than ballistics? Why, in a case of such magnitude, are we left with a wound but no weapon map? Why is the most basic proof, the bridge between a bullet and a barrel, still missing from the story we are told to believe? And here lies the chilling heart of it all. If the bullet doesn't fit the rifle, what else doesn't fit the story? The bullet should have been the anchor of this case. The single undeniable link between a life taken and the weapon that delivered the wound. Instead, it has become the missing link, a truth acknowledged but never confirmed. A fact spoken once, and then swallowed by silence. We saw a rifle. We heard of a bullet, but we never got the bridge between them. And until that silence is broken, justice remains unfinished. Because justice without proof is not justice. It is performance, and performance, no matter how convincing, can never replace truth. Truth doesn't disappear, it doesn't dissolve, it is buried. And the question we must all ask is simple. Who buried it this time? This is the moment we need to pause. Because at the very center of this case lies a contradiction too big to ignore. A doctor confirmed a bullet, the most undeniable piece of evidence in a shooting. And yet, the rifle displayed to the public as the supposed weapon has never been forensically connected to that bullet. Think about that for a second. The easiest test in the book, the most basic step in any investigation, to confirm whether the bullet and the weapon match, was either never done, never announced, or never passed. And here's the part that should trouble all of us. If the link was solid, wouldn't they have shouted it from the rooftops? Wouldn't that result have been the headline, the proof, the closure the public was promised? Instead, we were given silence. And silence is not justice. It is complicity. So I want to ask you directly, what does it mean when institutions control the image of truth, but refuse to confirm the facts behind it? What does it say about the value placed on Charlie Kirk's life, and about the trust we're supposed to have in the very systems that claim to protect us? Your voice matters here, because the more we accept silence, the more we become part of the silence. And I refuse to let that be the end of this story. Share your thoughts below. Do you believe this was a failure, or something far more deliberate? Because until that question is answered, justice for Charlie remains unfinished.